Today, we're talking about body brain meditation for traumatic brain injury and stroke, aiding recovery in cognitive function. So, especially important for those who have suffered traumatic brain injury or stroke. And yet, it's not necessary that one has to have experienced such devastating health crises to benefit, because working with this practice, even if you haven't experienced TBI stroke, and this is also can be beneficial for those who have experienced migraine headaches, as well as there's a woman who suffered from meningitis, which I'll go into that a little later. I'm Ben Ufana, for those who don't already know. And so let's get into it here. I'm going to refer to my notes because there's a lot of detail here for me to remember. From the time that I've been in practice, these past few decades, I've had people coming to me with such a wide range of issues. And it forced me, I actually want to learn as well. I have this curiosity, this desire to just keep learning, to expand my range, but I would have people coming in with this extraordinarily wide range of health-related challenges and also people with all kinds of emotional wounding. And so there's always a desire on my part to learn as much as possible, to learn and to understand and be able to assist people with whatever their needs are. At the age of 20, I began to apprentice with Horace Delkai, one of the last surviving traditional doctors among the Kiowa Indian tribe, an actual medicine man, and he would transmit portions of his own healing gifts to me. And the vision quest that we go through in order to earn the right to work with these gifts of healing, we're fasting 4 days and nights, no food and water, alone in the mountains, and having gone many times. As you continue to do so, you receive additional gifts of healing, and it just increases your capacity to be of assistance to people in need. And my mentor, during the time that I was apprenticing with him, and he said to me something like, I can't show you everything that you need to do. You need to just get in and start working with people, and it's going to reveal itself to you. And so I'd have people coming to me with a wide range of health-related issues. Initially, I didn't know all that much starting out, but I could tell that certain types of issues or conditions responded very well. I'd have people coming in with traumatic brain injuries or those who had suffered from a stroke. Comparatively, I work with someone with digestive disorders like colitis or Crohn's disease or irritable bowel syndrome. And these conditions tend to respond rapidly to the form of healing process that I facilitate. And yet, TBI and stroke would be slower in comparison. And yet, the difference that a lot of these individuals were experiencing as a result of the work that we were doing was profound compared to anything else that they were doing. A number of years ago, I think I had done maybe 1 or 2 sessions with the man, and as I customarily do, I gave him a call just to follow up, wanted to see how he's doing. It turns out he was sleeping at the time I called. It was somewhere in the evening, maybe between 8, 9 p.m. I woke him up, and as he's waking up, he's realizing that something was way off, and turns out that he was showing signs of someone having a stroke. He called 911 and sought medical attention. Stroke or TBI is a medical emergency. And if you ever recognize the signs or symptoms that you're having stroke, they say if you respond within the first 3 hours is that crucial window of time. And doing so can prevent much more severe damage from occurring. So he did the right thing. I continued to work with this man for some time afterwards, after he initially sought medical attention. And he had some kind of visual field distortion, enormous amount of anger, rage surfacing. Oftentimes, when people suffer a catastrophic health crisis, stroke, heart attack, cancer, there's a way in which a lot of our defense mechanisms just break down. We have this way in which our psyche forms these defensive structures in which we contain a lot of the stress, a lot of the emotional wounding or traumas that we've suffered over the course of our lives. And as that defensive armor comes down, it's like a lifetime of a lot of these stress, a lot of these emotions, these memories, all that we've contained for all these years, that all comes out, which it did with this individual who I refer to as Rat in the chapter. And I encourage you to actually read the chapter because it goes much more into depth, describing the various aspects of stroke and traumatic brain injury from a medical standpoint. It's just too much detail for me to include in the video. So I'll post the link below the video. By the way, do click like, subscribe to my channel. And if you know anyone, especially who's experienced traumatic brain injury or stroke, then share the video with them. Working with Rhett, he did experience a great deal of improvement during the time that we were working together. There was still some residual distortion in his visual field, and yet one of the profound differences is that much of that emotional wounding was healing. He became much more relaxed, easygoing. He had a relationship that was very ambiguous, and it was causing him a great deal of pain. And so as that attachment began to dissolve and he was able to let go, much of that anger abated, and he's able to connect with the woman with whom he resonated to a much greater extent. She moved across country and he soon followed, and they've been together ever since. And so he's now with someone who, and I think for the first time in his life, he's with someone who truly loves him, that he can love, and much happier, much more meaningful, fulfilling relationship. Symptoms of stroke and TBI, it's on a continuum. It could be anywhere from mild to severe. The milder end of the spectrum, it could be temporary confusion, slight headaches, brief episodes of dizziness. On the more severe end, those symptoms could be much more long-lasting, persistent cognitive impairment, speech, language difficulties, challenges with motor skills, sensory impressions, headache, vertigo, dizziness, fatigue, difficulties with sleep, sensitivity to light and sound. On an emotional level, there could be all kinds of behavioral changes, irritability, anxiety, depression, increased agitation. For those who've suffered more extreme symptoms, especially with traumatic brain injury, seizures, weakness, numbness in the extremities, and more specifically with stroke, there's also symptoms such as weakness, arms and leg, especially like on one side of the body, other symptoms, trouble walking, dizziness, loss of balance, lack of coordination, severe headaches, cognitive and perceptual symptoms would include confusion, trouble with speaking, understanding speech. Emotional challenges can include depression, anxiety, frustration, irritability. Part of the reason I included both stroke and TBI in the same article and video here is because there is a lot of overlap. Both experience significant cognitive impairment, impairment in physical functioning. With both TBI and stroke, as I said, they're both medical emergencies. If you or anyone else experiences either one, I encourage you to seek out medical attention immediately. Even those who have sought out medical attention, there's still prolonged effects of both TBI and stroke, which is a combination of what I already mentioned, a lot of the issues with cognitive impairment, prolonged difficulties with loss of memory, difficulty concentrating. These symptoms persist, as well as the emotional issues like depression and difficulty maintaining relationships, functioning in their work and other aspects of their lives. And so that's where I come in for many people, because after seeking uh, medical treatment, I'll end up working with a lot of these people because they're experiencing just these continuing symptoms. Two individuals, I'd like to share their examples because I feel they are some of the best examples of individuals who have recovered. The first I'll refer to as Bill. He experienced traumatic brain injury that affected his occipital lobe, and he was experiencing just extreme exhaustion, lack of mental clarity or brain fog. He just couldn't concentrate. And around the time that I started working with him, he had enrolled in massage school. And the first time around, he was having such difficulty retaining information, and he wasn't able to pass the anatomy and physiology portion of the curriculum. And so we had to go back and repeat that. But by the time he repeated anatomy and physiology, he actually passed that part of uh, his training. And not too long afterwards, he took the state licensing exam in New Mexico. He passed that. He did quite well on it. And he was able to work as a massage therapist for full time. He was holding up quite well. The other individual, in this case a woman, suffered from meningitis, which she had contracted some years earlier, which meningitis is different on one hand, a different condition altogether from TBI or stroke. And yet there were a lot of similarities. She too was experiencing serious cognitive impairment. When I first met her, to engage with her in conversation, she would say a few words and then she would just space out, and it would take her a little time to gather her thoughts or come back, and it would take her quite some time to complete a thought. And yet, as I continued to work with her, the first session she did, actually, she had a pretty intense reaction, little healing crises there. And, and this was early in my career. I hadn't been working all that long, maybe, let's see, I think about 5 or 6 years. I've been in practice by that time. Initially, I wasn't quite so sure what to do, but she called me after a few days and she said, I think this is really helping me. I want to continue. So I went back and we continued to do sessions for some time until I moved out of New Mexico. And she experienced tremendous improvement. After a while, I'd be having conversations with her, and she was able to maintain that focus. And she basically sounded like just any normal, functional individual. Since that time, I've worked with many individuals over the years who had suffered either stroke or traumatic brain injuries, varying degrees on that continuum. Of all the conditions I work with, even though it can be a bit slower and more tedious compared to other health issues, again, like digestive disorders or someone injured in an automobile accident, it's one of the conditions that I find most enjoyable to work with. Again, the fact that I spent years training with the traditional Native American doctors, so as I work with these individuals, I act as a conduit. I allow this extraordinarily powerful presence to work through me. And some individuals actually describe sensations of feeling this presence going within the body. There's a friend from years ago that would do sessions, and as I'd work with her, she'd tell me she could actually feel like some kind of physical activity taking place within the brain itself as I would be doing sessions. As I'd work with people, they would feel this kind of reconstructive process taking place, this movement or reconstruction taking place within the areas of the body that were affected, either some kind of disease process or injury. There's also a system of meditation practices that I began to develop in my mid 20s. And initially, it had to do with it was around that time that a lot of the traumas of my childhood and adolescence, when they began to surface, and I found myself reenacting those painful dynamics in my relationships. I tended to attract women that were reflecting a lot of my emotional wounding. And so instinctively, I just had a sense that I needed to dive into the depth of that pain, and I would just breathe very softly and deeply. And I would stay with those all consuming painful emotions basically till I came out the other side of it. And in doing so, it had the effect of activating or awakening my body's own innate healing intelligence. It's the same healing intelligence that when you get a cut or a bruise, that the body is able to facilitate that healing of the injury. And in this case, it was helping me to facilitate the healing of these deep emotional wounds. Over time, people are coming to me with this wide range of health related issues and other people dealing with emotional wounding of one form or another. And I needed to be able to adapt these meditation practices. And so when I would have people coming in with traumatic brain injuries or who had suffered from a stroke and or any of these other conditions, the thought process going through my mind at these times is, what do we do here? And so I would always find ways to adapt these meditation practices. I would develop completely different applications for the meditation practices that I initially began to develop in my mid 20s. So people suffering from traumatic brain injuries or stroke generally, I find that many of them will experience a range of sensations such as pressure or tightness in specific areas of the brain. Parts of the brain can feel, they could experience a numbness or a deadening. Usually that has a lot to do with some of the neurons, just are actual injuries to the brain where there's damage, parts of the brain just no longer functioning. Also, fatigue, heaviness. Some people would describe what feels like electrical malfunction, jolts or zaps in the brain, sometimes tingling. That could have to do with either nerve damage or misfiring of the neurons. Also, pulsing, throbbing, and some people, there would be this heightened sensitivity. And in that case, there would be more of a sense of being overwhelmed or on sensory overload. Working with people with traumatic brain injuries and stroke, I proceed very cautiously, especially in the beginning, because I want to make be certain that they're able to do these practices, that the whole process is manageable for them. When people are experiencing physical pain or these other more uh, intense sensations, the headache, the numbing, the deadness, sometimes it can elicit stronger reactions. And so, initially, maybe in the beginning, I might start having them bring their awareness to those sensations wherever they feel or wherever they experience that, whatever part of the brain they're experiencing those sensations or that reactivity. So I'll have them center their awareness, go into immerse their awareness in the depth of those sensations and breathe softly and deeply. If it's eliciting a stronger reaction, then I'll have them change the focus. I'll have them just shift their focus so that it's a more generalized focus throughout the body, and also paying more specific attention to their breathing simultaneously. So, with that more diffuse or generalized focus throughout the body, and also focusing on the breathing simultaneously, very, very soft, very deep, that has more the effect of diffusing that reactivity. Now, when it's more the sensations of numbing, deadening, I'll find that I can have them stay present with that for a longer period, usually. Again, I approach each person I work with individually, and I'm cautiously starting out 2, 3 minutes, maybe going up to 5 minutes that first time, seeing how they respond. If they're doing well, I'll extend that time, maybe go up to 8 minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. But I'll continue to check in periodically to see how they're doing. As they continue to focus their awareness in those areas of sensation, the numbing, the deadening, the pressure or tension, these distortions that they feel in and around their head or within the brain itself. Many will indicate to me that they experience some kind of movement or activity. Often there's alleviation of the discomfort that they're experiencing. Often they indicate to me that they could feel activity, that they feel as though the parts of their brain are actually starting to, as if the neurons are starting to fire correctly, and that it stimulates cognitive function. It helps to clear up the brain fog and other discomforts or symptoms they're experiencing. And as I work with these individuals, both teaching them the meditation practice or walking them through the meditation, and especially as I get to work with them individually one on one, I'm working with them on the table, facilitating the healing process that I was trained in by this traditional Native American doctor. I see a lot of these individuals beginning to regain much of their function. There's an improvement in their speech, improvements in their mobility, their ability to function in different areas of their life, their relationships, and their work, and other areas. And I find that especially gratifying. Those who experience the greatest transformation are the ones who have the opportunity to work with me in person. Now, there's the meditation practice itself, and then there's the work we do on the table. These are two very different aspects of the work. Even if you're not able to work with me in person, you can still derive tremendous benefit from the meditation practice. If you're not able to work with me in person, I am available. Now, if you feel this can benefit you, then pick up the phone, give me a call, or message me, reach out to me, because I'll be happy to guide you through these practices. We can set up a phone session. In more recent years, there's been a great deal of research into the benefits of meditation. And there are so many different forms of meditation, and a lot of these meditative practices are not necessarily focused on addressing issues such as traumatic brain injury or stroke. And yet, despite that, even these other types of meditative practices are showing a great deal of benefit for the brain itself. And this has been documented where they would have these Buddhist monks, for instance, and they would go out in the mountains into the freezing cold. They would take their robes off and soak them in a bucket of water, and then they'd put the robes back on, and they're sitting there and they're meditating, but they're doing these intensive practices, and they generate so much heat from their body, and it actually dries out the robes that they're wearing. They were doing these, what, MRI scans on some of these Buddhist monks, and they were finding that it, it was actually increasing the gray matter in certain areas of the brain. As we age, there's brain shrinkage, there is a loss of gray matter throughout the brain. Whereas what they're finding is, as they would do these MRI scans, that it would slow the loss of gray matter, and they're actually showing for a number of individuals who do meditation practice, they're showing additional gray matter in, was it the which has to do with learning, memory, and emotional regulation, again, would show the increase of gray matter, and also in the temporal parietal junction, which has to do with perspective, empathy, and compassion. There are many variations of this meditation practice that I've developed over the years. For the most part, as I teach people these practices, I find that the majority of people are not all that present in their bodies. They're living up in their heads, maybe from the diaphragm up, but there's varying degrees of dissociation. There's a lot of disconnect from the physical body, disconnect from our emotions. And so primarily, my primary emphasis is getting people deeper into the body and focused on healing the deep emotional wounds. And as they do so, they become more present, more engaged, more highly functional. It improves the quality of their relationships in many areas of their life. Now, when I work with people with traumatic brain injuries or people that have suffered from stroke, the primary focus is having them focus in and around the head, and more specifically within the brain itself. Now, again, you don't necessarily have to have experienced stroke or traumatic brain injury to benefit from working with this practice. I will experiment myself doing all these variations of the practice. And so when I focus my attention within the brain, initially what I'll experience is sometimes there's a I have this sense or this perception of light. I could see it, I can feel it. It feels literally, it feels like my brain's lighting up as I focus within the brain. In addition to that, there's after sitting and doing practice for some time with my awareness focused within the brain, is that there's a greater mental clarity. And that really helps when I sit down to write. I could think more clearly, I gain more insight. A lot of times I have this sense of like, okay, here's what I need to say to this person in this conversation, or here's what I need to do. There's a difference in the practice. When I focus up here within the brain itself, there's more clarity, insight, and time seems to go rather quickly. When I focus deeper down in the body, like in the chest cavity or within the abdomen, then it tends to bring up more of the emotions that are held within this part of the body. But I do find that whenever I focus within, in and around the head, or more specifically within the brain, it does stimulate brain function. So even if you haven't experienced traumatic brain injury or stroke, you could still derive tremendous benefit by working with this practice. However, if you have experienced either traumatic brain injury, stroke, migraine, or like this other woman, Sonia, that I've worked with for some time, that helped facilitate the improvement in her cognitive function. Of course, we were also doing the work on the table. Anyway, it's a very powerful practice. I would encourage you to work with it. You can derive tremendous benefit, this and the other practices I teach. So I think I've covered everything needed to for today. Again, click like, share this video with other people, especially if you know they've suffered from some kind of traumatic brain injury, stroke, anything else that has resulted in cognitive impairment or impairment in other areas of their ability to function. And reach out to me if I could be of assistance. Bye for now.